Okay, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. I must apologise in advance because I had to attend a funeral earlier in the week. It's not quite as polished as I would hope. I'm going to talk fairly generally about why doing analysis with OpenStreetMap data is not only interesting, but can also lead us to improve the data in ways which we wouldn't do with the sort of mainstream activities we do. And the mainstream activities are what I call the 3 R's. Now, those of you who are not native English speakers might not know that the 3 R's in English are reading, writing, and arithmetic. They're the sort of ground level educational things, and certainly right-wing politicians are always saying there is not enough focus on the 3 R's. So by analogy, I've said we have 3 R's. So there's rendering, which is cartography and transformations of data like for the Garmin IMG file format. Routing, and because I really needed this euphony and starting with R, something called rummaging. Now, rummaging is when you have something deep in the cellar or the attic and you have to go and push boxes aside to find it. So that's the word I used for search. If we want to be more polite, we can, with the analogy is to the medieval university trivium of grammar, rhetoric and logic, which was regarded as the fundamental underpinning which you needed before you studied the next stage, quadrivium. And it's a bit naughty because, of course, the word trivial comes from trivium. And so these, I think, are really the mainstream activities which typically most of us focus on how we consume map data. We focus on one or more of these activities. We can think of other kinds of activities, and the one I'm going to talk about is analysis. And again, for reasons of being able to talk about the 4 A's and keep this analogy with medieval, the quadrivium, I've said analysis, amusement, which is using OpenStreetMap data to build games, auguries, simulation. So can you use OpenStreetMap to model scenarios, and lastly, art. And I'm not going to talk about the others, but these have very different characteristics in how the data might be consumed. In some cases, and in particularly with analysis, you don't necessarily know what sort of data you want to consume until someone presents you with the analytical problem. By contrast, we know that for search, we want good quality address data. For routing, we know we want to collect information on speeds and speed limits. So often the data that one might need for analysis is much less constrained, and because of this, we encounter patterns in the data which we wouldn't otherwise pick up. So I'll run through a few examples of different kinds of analysis, largely drawn from things which I've talked about on my blog, so you can read a little bit more about how they've been done in detail. And the first sort of analysis you might do is just very simple. Set a very small number of tags, a very small number of categories, and some simple things, as simple as anything is just counting how many there are of something in a country. The first one I ever did was this one, which was looking at the density of pubs in Britain, which received a certain amount of interest. And this type of analysis can be done really quickly. One that I would like to do, because it's very important for understanding what the bird populations might be in the countryside, is measuring the total length of the length of meters of hedgerow per square kilometre. And these are sort of things which it's quite easy to do if we have the data. And this was a simple example where I pulled stats principally out of Tag Info, because the Ordnance Survey, the British National Mapping Agency, had put on their blog a set of figures about things, and I thought, well, it would be amusing just to reproduce the same sort of figures from OpenStreetMap. And this was very easy to do. Virtually all these figures came from Tag Info, and on this side I selected some of the more esoteric things which I thought that the National Mapping Agency did not did not map things like whether a pub had a real fire or not. So part of analysis is to look for fun things, you know, but also it teaches us something about our data. One area which I think makes a really big use of analysis already is the humanitarian activities. And what I think is different from their analyses from what we can do, say, in Europe, is typically they're creating the data with some analytical problem immediately in mind. And they often start with a fairly blank area of map to map, so they don't have conflicts about tagging or issues about how different style of mapping and the mappings. But there are some excellent examples, too, due to Andrew Buck. The main picture shows the town of Gulu in Uganda, and he did some work mapping trees and mapping the crown diameter of the trees in order to calculate fire risk in the area. And that's a really interesting example of something that it would be really difficult to do with any other kind of map data, and you could create and collect and analyze the data quite quickly. I think we've heard already from other people about using OpenStreetMap for risk analysis in flood situations in Sardinia and Köln, and this is Indonesia and the Philippines. So that's really quite a well-developed type of analysis which is done in a hot situation. And a really interesting one recently has been the use of putting building profiles in towns in West Africa, where the recent Ebola outbreak was happening, so that Médecins Sans Frontières could arrive at approximate population densities for different parts of the town. And this shows that the map that they generated, and the different colours represent different approximations to population density. So for humanitarian purposes, we can do really quite rich and interesting type analyses, fairly straightforward. There are also routing-based analyses, and this is why the 3 R's are really important, because they form a groundwork for. This just shows an example of what would happen if you put a bridge at Dunbar Station in terms of accessibility to the station to foot access. Again, the humanitarian people have done tsunami escape routes in the Inner Safe project that Kate Chapman and others work on. And recently, I don't know if people saw this, someone did a blog post using OpenStreetMap data to work out where he should live in Portland, Oregon, in terms of accessibility to various facilities. And that's the blog post if you want to read more. And in principle, there should be many more. They're not as easy to do as I would like. There isn't just but I think, I didn't attend the OSRM talk, but I think there may be something happening on that front. But one of the forms of analysis we do more above everything else is we look at our own naval. We use analysis to look at OSM data so that we can understand issues about the data, exactly as we heard in the last talk, and I think earlier by the talks by Kirill Bondarenko and João Porto de Albuquerque, so I'm not going to say anymore, but just provide some examples that I've done recently. Up here, this shows footpaths. In Britain, in England and Wales, we have particular laws about which footpaths in the countryside you can walk upon. And we need to document that quite accurately on OpenStreetMap for a number of reasons. So this just shows the county of Hampshire and the green paths, and my apologies to anyone who's red-green colourblind about this. The green paths show ones where we've actually captured the legal status of the path, and the red ones we don't. And at the moment, I and I'm helping with Nick Whiteleg, and we're going round various places, and we have these maps on our phones and go and look for the red paths and then walk along them and map the styles. This shows places schools which serve food are yellow dots. This is from an open data government set, and the red dots are schools mapped on OpenStreetMap. Now, not all areas provided data into the open government set, but you can quite quickly start to find schools which we haven't mapped on OpenStreetMap. I mean, particularly in the north of Scotland. So you can see that here and here and here and here and here, there are little yellow missing dots. I hope I've cleared all of the ones there. This shows a comparison of land parcels done by Chris Hill. This is the one set of data is the OpenStreetMap land parcels, and the other are the official land parcels. I did this, but I don't have any pictures of it because I was concerned that the restrictions on the land parcel data might not make it completely open. But these were my figures showing from using R to look at the correlation between our parcels and their parcels. Lots of the analyses I've done have been really focused on where I can compare it with some other official set of data, and I know that there's a region, a district in OSM which has been mapped reasonably comprehensively. I've been trying to establish that basically, if we know the OSM data is reasonably complete, can we produce an output which is roughly equivalent to the official output? In most places, I've been quite pleased about that. And so a lot of the things that I've been doing are of that nature. So when we do analysis, what's good about OSM? We have a really, really big data set. And that means you can look at all sorts of interesting problems. It's often much more up to date than even the best quality official data, and that sometimes can be very important. Obviously, in humanitarian situations, that's very important. One of the things which I think is underappreciated, for analysis, we can spend time taking the data and manipulating it and turning it into the forms that we want. We can do lots of things with the tags to make them convenient for our analysis. And there's a tendency to believe that somehow we will only consume tags as they go into OpenStreetMap. And we have a really rich range of tools, and that's not to be underestimated. On the other hand, we have quite a number of challenges. We have, most of these are well known. We have problems with tagging semantics, we have incomplete data, we have inconsistent data. Perhaps less obviously, we have big problems with areas if you want to do things with area data. I think there's an emerging problem where people are very interested in their own use case, and they start funneling the tagging to support that use case and forget that the same elements need to support other people's use cases as well. There's generalization that often OpenStreetMap data is more detailed than we want, and we need to transform it in some way to make it more convenient to consume. And I'm not going to say anything about that, partly because if I did, Christoph would put me right. And we have something which I call emergent data, which is data which in principle is there in the OpenStreetMap data set, but to actually extract it and transform the data in such a way you can use it is actually really difficult. And I'll quickly run through some examples of each of these. Tagging. I don't need to, Kirill's already covered a lot of this ground. These are just three of my pet hates. Hamlets for post-industrial areas of American cities. Forests for US national forests. The brown areas are areas actually with trees, and the polygon with the boundary is actually what is mapped as land use equals forest in this case. And the tree data is US National Forest data. And ski areas as leisure recreation ground. Now, my basic expectation of a recreation ground is one fundamental property: it's flat. And one could go on forever about issues with tags, but so I won't. Incomplete data. This shows a series of POIs where I've got quite good external open data, which I can compare directly with OpenStreetMap data, and the different colours just represent the overall percentage. Some things are much better mapped across the country than others, and some are just pretty awful. I think this one up here is supermarkets. We do quite well on post boxes, we do quite well on pubs. But some tag classes, some categories of POIs are well mapped and others aren't. So you need to understand the nature of that before you do any analysis. One of the problems is where you have data inconsistency. If something is relatively poorly mapped, you get a huge amount of inconsistency. And we see this particularly with shop types, where these shops, there are something like 30 of each of them in the whole planet, and there are 10 or 11 different tags used to describe what kind of shop they are. But I cannot emphasize more, multiple tags meaning the same thing are generally not a problem because they're very easy to post-process. The real problem is a single tag being used to mean multiple things. If we want to do anything with polygons, we have the problem, first of all, we don't have an area type, so a lot of our polygons are not going to be well formed. But the biggest problem is that we have polygons on top of polygons, and we need really quite sophisticated processing rules to make a single layer of polygons for any particular analysis we need to do. I have written such rules, and I really must get round to writing up on the blog exactly how I did it. But I think other people have encountered this. I think the author of Maperitive had some problems about doing this with Vienna, with land use in Vienna. So you need, if you want to do analysis with polygons, it's really quite hard unless you're just dealing with a single class of polygons. Lastly, emergent data. This is in this case, I'm trying to extract which areas of Karlsruhe could be classified as retail land use solely on the basis of where the shops are mapped. So I put a grid of, I think, 50 meters across or 100 meters across Karlsruhe, and then marked every grid where at least one shop occurred, and then I merged adjacent grid squares, and then finally created a set of polygons from those, which are these slightly darker ones. And then at the last stage, what I did is I found all the shops and put a concave hole around them to get some kind of polygon. But the end result of these is much less attractive, much less useful than if you actually went and drew a retail land use polygon yourself. So there are quite a lot of examples of this throughout OpenStreetMap where you think, oh, well, you could derive this data from the data we already have, but in practice, it's quite a lot harder to achieve. And one of these things, which is a built-up area, we have no simple way to derive a built-up area because we actually tag at a finer level of granularity. Although Christoph, I believe, has some algorithms too. So I think okay, I'll leave that there. I'll just mention, because this came up last week. Last week, the BBC had a program on the radio talking about using OpenStreetMap data to do an analysis comparing the area of Britain or the area of Surrey covered by golf courses compared with the area of Surrey covered by houses. And they used OpenStreetMap data, and Mookie wrote a blog post on his Parvesham where he was really critical about the idea of doing any kind, well, I read it as critical of doing any kind of analysis on OpenStreetMap, using OpenStreetMap data, because of its lack of comprehensiveness and because of its lack of consistency. And my view is if you choose your data set correctly, you can control for that and work with it. So I felt this was a challenge, so I had to go and pull out all the golf courses in Surrey. And because I'm not very sophisticated with Overpass, I did it in PostGIS, but you could do it in Overpass. And this shows the green areas are all the golf courses, and if I sum them up, I get an area of 2.5% of the land area of Surrey is covered with golf courses, and the news report said it was 2.43 or something. So I think that means that in this case, we're probably pretty close to 100% of covered golf courses. But one of the great things with greater availability of open data is you can actually use open data to control how good the mapping of something like golf courses is very quickly. So you can quickly take a data set and compare it with something else and decide whether it's valid to use for the sort of analysis you want to do. And here, these little yellow dots, I just scanned an open data set of places which serve food, and I just extracted all the places with the word golf in them and plotted them on the map, and there were really very few. There was one up here, which was any distance from an actual mapped golf course. And when I looked at this one up here, it was very interesting because it was already mapped, but it was mapped as a land use equals common, which it was. But it also has a golf course on it, and it is also a protected conservation area. So it was actually a case where the tagging was going to be quite complicated anyway. So actually, I think using the golf course data from OSM was fine, but I hope they didn't use the buildings because that would have been completely inaccurate. So you have to choose your data sets and you have to choose the area you do it in, but as long as you understand roughly what the parameters are, you can actually do some quite nice analysis. So what can we as a whole do? I discovered this word omphaloskepsis, which means navel gazing. I think we collectively we can do more. We still need to do more and more looking at different patterns of the data and finding out what it is that the anomalies and so on. And we need to look at the data in the whole in general. We need to be much more aware of other use cases than the ones we traditionally associate with the data, because when you're doing analysis, you might be doing something completely different from the use case where people were originally creating the data. So I'd ask you not to tag for the renderer, don't tag just for the router, don't just tag just for the search engine. In general, we need much better techniques for a whole host of generalizations, cartographic generalization, summarizing tags which are in a long tail into more coherent, higher level groups. Please don't degrade the tag semantics. That really makes things bad. And sometimes when people write rules on the wiki about what a tag means, this has the effect of people reusing the tag to mean something else from what people have already used it to map. And that can make certain things fairly useless. I mean, we have this wonderful tag land use equals grass. And 3 years ago, I taught in Vienna about comparing land use mapped on OpenStreetMap with the urban atlas. And with land use equals grass, any place with land use equals grass, that analysis would no longer be possible because it doesn't have any real meaning as a land use category, or it has so many meanings it's impossible to interpret. And lastly, I'd make a plea for to move slightly away from the one rule, one element thing, or recognize that there are things which are emergent and that there is advantage to mapping them in time to derive them. And I know Christoph is probably solving some of these problems without having to do that. But I'll leave that there. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Jerry, for the interesting talk, and we can have questions. Anyone? Questions? Come on. Yeah.
I have two questions. One
Microphone.
Oh, yes. I have two questions. My name is Stefan Keller. First, did you show some cases where translation would help better because it's a research of about 15 years of cartographic translation, and you know database translation, so you know the tools which are available and it's hard to enhance them. And the second question is about ontologies. Aren't there any tools to edit and maintain thesaurs for tag hierarchies?
I don't know about that. I don't know. I mean, the point is that the great advantage of OpenStreetMap is that it's ontology light, and that's really good. But if you build database, you can spend ages worrying about particular hierarchies. And all I would say at the moment, we've done. I'll just show you quickly, if I can. One of my colleagues in Nottingham has been building a website called OSM Nottingham, and he's been doing some sort of collecting of different classes of tags into groups. And in the course of this, we've encountered, for instance, with sports facilities, we've encountered all sorts of problems about grouping them. But this one I particularly like because it shows an illustration of the general problem. Because these are the range of shops tags that we have for things which you buy to put in the house, which is a pretty simple general category. But this is just one city the size of Karlsruhe, and just look at all these different tags. So we don't have any way of doing that. But I think in general you can just write, at the moment it's really straightforward to write fairly simple rules to post-process that. The real problem is in all the tags you don't know about. Now, for a single analysis that's fine because you can just do a trawl through tag info or something and find until you know that you've hit most of the cases. But if you're looking at shops in general, something like, I think in Nottingham we have 1,600 shops mapped, and there are something like 150 different shop tags. So, and really it needs to be grouped down to about 16 for any kind of sensible analysis.
Okay, I think we need to wrap it up because the others are waiting at the closing for us to arrive. So anyone who wants to go to the closing, please move over to the building A to participate.
Yeah, and
Jerry again.
Can I just make a plug? Anyone who fancies coming out to the nature reserve near Weingarten tomorrow morning, we meet at the Hauptbahnhof at 8 o'clock. And anyone who wants to join us, you can buy a city solo ticket for €6, which is valid on the trams and on the trains. So that if you want to come and you want to come by tram to the Hauptbahnhof, get your ticket beforehand, you'll save some money.
Yeah, that's certainly been an interesting thing tomorrow morning. Thank you.